Bigfoot Collectors Club with Michael and Riley. I know a story of high strangeness or two. Let's do this.
Well, hello, and welcome to Bigfoot Collectors Club, the show where we talk to amazing guests about their personal paranormal history and share stories of high strangeness. I'm your host, Michael McMillan. With me always is the Bray Bard.
Ah, nice. Riley Bray.
That's right. That name was submitted by Aurora Borealis, the resident drow over on BCC The Other Side, our Patreon. Thank you, Aurora Borealis.
Yeah, good one.
You know all about drows, don't you, Matt Cook?
I do.
Yeah. Matt was my spiritual guide during my Baldur's Gate 3 quest.
Mm-hmm. I'm so excited for that update and the new subclasses to come out.
Oh.
I can't stand it.
I know. I got to get back into it. It's really lovely. And
it's so good.
Oh, it's great. We've already talked to him. Our guest this week is an actor, famous comedic performer from LA's Groundlings and Man with the Plan and the film Champions. It's Matt Cook. Matt, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
We're happy that you're here. Matt is playing the lead role of Jim Sparks, an alien contactee, abductee, and the subject of the book, The Keepers, an alien message for the human race, which is the primary source for our 2-part deep dive series that we kicked off last week. So if you're coming in now, you might want to hop back to the last episode, get all caught up, because we're going to be talking more about aliens and Florida this week. And if you thought last week things were weird, things get pretty bonkers in this episode, and the high strangeness really ratchets up to 11 in this one.
Bring it on.
I'm excited.
Yeah. Okay, before we do that, let's nominate our 5-star Club Scout of the Week. Riley, this is a friend of the show who's given us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, which will help get the show to more people.
Indeed. And today's 5-star Club Scout is Erdav. And the title of the review is Fun. And the review is as follows. Came for the Bigfoot, stayed for the unhinged ad reads. 5 stars.
Thanks, Erdav. I like it's like fun. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah,
it's good. Yeah. Having a good time.
All right.
I mean, what else can we ask for? That's all you need to do. Just hop on, bang out a couple letters, type in some alien alphabet, and get out of there.
Draw some lines.
It's great.
Draw some lines.
And fun's great, too.
Yeah.
Let's not downplay fun.
Fun is never overrated, okay?
No, it's great.
It's great. We love it. All right, let's get back to our friend Jim Sparks, shall we?
Let's do it.
When we last left him, Jim Sparks had been going through a months-long grueling abduction experience. It's now March 1989, thereabouts. Alien Greys had been abducting him from his home in Texas and making him learn a strange alien alphabet aboard what was presumably an alien spacecraft. Just as Jim's life and marriage had begun to fall apart under duress from his newly found status as an alien abductee, the aliens, who called themselves Star People, revealed that they'd also been abducting his wife, Teresa. Things only get weirder from here. Strap in, Club Scouts. We're headed back to alien school. It's time for Jim Sparks and the Star People, Part 2.
That's my wife! She is ours. Always has been. Always will be.
Teresa looked over from her workstation and seemed to be staring straight through Jim. The alien voices in Jim's head demanded that he compete with Teresa. As he began to scribble out as many alien symbols as possible using his paralyzed hand, and remember now he's only able to move his finger and a little bit of his wrist, he could see his wife writing swiftly at her table. Now let's just say Teresa smoked Jim at the competition.
I like that they just were like, now you are mathletes.
Yes. Olympics of the mind. Yeah, and she
But
kicked
it's
his
just
ass.
writing the alphabet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he said she was like composing like stuff with it, you know. So really there's no competition here. She seems to be much more affluent with this alien language than he is. When it was over, the Star People projected a 3D holographic image on the wall because Jim was saying, "What are you doing with Teresa? What's going on here?" And this image, which he describes as a 3D hologram, played out like a movie, showing a little girl being born, growing up in a poor household, going through adolescence, dating boys. He specifically says he saw a scene with her making out with a boy when she was a teenager.
That's brutal. He should have done better with the alphabet.
Yeah. All the way up to her wedding. Yeah, that's the punishment.
That's the punishment. Here's your wife's dating history.
Yeah.
In 3D.
And he was like, wait a minute, that's my wife. And all the way up to her wedding with Jim. Jim realized that this meant that the Star People had been keeping track of Teresa, watching her, and possibly abducting her whole life. The next morning, Jim gently approached the subject with Teresa, asking her who the creatures were that had been taking them away. She looked at him with a cold, hard-knowing stare and said,
You mean my helpers from heaven?
okay, if your wife ever says to you, oh, are you talking about my helpers from heaven?
Nope.
Seek a marriage counselor immediately.
Yeah. That's a lot.
It's a lot. And Jim was like, helpers from heaven? These things are aliens. They're not from heaven. And he flashed back to a moment during one of his early abductions where they sort of tried to present themselves as the voice of God. And Jim immediately pushed back and he's like, don't play that trick on me. You guys are nothing to do with God. I know. And the aliens are like, all right, well, we tried. So it kind of implies that one of the techniques or methods that they're using to control people or talk to people is frame them as some sort of godly like beings, which, you know, if they can take you out of bed and they can make you do stuff, it's kind of what they, you know, might be what they are. I mean, they
God
may
mode.
even,
Yeah.
they're in God mode. Teresa told Jim they should not speak about them. In fact, they're not allowed to speak to them. Her helpers did not want them to be talking about this subject. Now, this day just happened to be the day when Jim was expecting a house call from a pastor. Although he was not a religious man, he confided in a local pastor who reassured Jim that he knew someone he could talk to about his abduction experiences. He'd bring someone over to his house to see him later in the week. Well, that afternoon, the pastor arrived with a man he introduced as a demonologist and exorcist, because this was satanic work at play in the pastor's eyes. Jim had to explain to someone yet again that what he was going through had nothing to do with Satan, but everything to do with aliens. He even turned to Teresa and begged her, remember, we talked about the helpers from heaven. Can you tell them that we're both going through this? She simply looked at the pastor and the exorcist and said, I don't know what he's talking about. The pastor explained that either Jim was being visited by demons or he was doing drugs. So, which was it, Jim? And Jim basically went, all right, fine, I'm doing drugs. Get out of my house.
Hell yeah, Jim. Don't take that shit.
Yeah, he escorted the men from his home, realizing that he was well and truly alone in this experience. But that didn't mean he wasn't going to hatch a plan to save both himself and Teresa from the Grays. Believing that the aliens could find him only at home or wherever he was sleeping, Jim hatched an escape plan for the next visit by his abductors. One night, while he was laying awake in bed, Jim got that dreadful feeling in his stomach and that buzzing sensation and realized that It would be just a moment before an acceleration took place and he was pulled aboard the Starship classroom yet again. Shaking himself to alertness, he got out of bed and went to Teresa, who was dead asleep. It took a few shakes, but he finally woke her up enough to get her to go to their car with him so they could drive off into the night. Teresa remained groggy and half asleep during the escape, asking Jim where they were going. Jim was taking them out to the country, far from the home where the Grays couldn't find him. And as they were driving down a gravel road in an unincorporated area, Teresa suddenly jolted up and grabbed a hold of the wheel, yelling at Jim to pull over. Jim veered to the side of the road, avoiding a crash into the ditch. He turned to Teresa and asked why she'd done that, but she was dead asleep. Suddenly, the unwelcome feeling of acceleration returned. Remember, this is the term that he uses for being pulled or abducted onto the alien craft. Jim realized that his kidnappers were well aware of his whereabouts and were coming out to the country to claim him. Suddenly, Jim found himself outside of his car, being led by two worker Grays along the gravel road and out into a grassy field where they approached a giant glowing dome that was sitting there. The next thing he knew, he was right back in the classroom. So, this is when things start to get even weirder, okay? So now I just want to make a little notation here about the white glowing dome in the middle of a farm field. This sounds a lot like the Pennsylvania Bigfoot encounter from Chestnut Ridge that we talked about with Steve Berg a couple weeks back. We're in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. Multiple eyewitnesses saw this big glowing dome in the middle of their field, and Bigfoot-type entities came out of it and started walking along with glowing red eyes and walking along a fence post. And the dome faded away, and it left this like residual glow that was so bright that they could read a newspaper by it. So I'm just saying, some things are lining up here from other lore that we've heard before.
Connecting the dots.
Connecting the dots. And this is why I go, okay, if he's having some type of episode or if he's just making this stuff up, now it's possible. Maybe he's borrowing from things I just heard before, but that's a pretty obscure case for a man who has whose business is Ashley Estates.
Who's walking around fields at night with newspapers?
Well, the paranormal investigators came out because they were like, what is this glow? And they were like, one guy had a newspaper that he was like, you can read this newspaper here.
Right. That'll do it.
That's not the type of questions we need to be asking ourselves, Matt. So
just try to learn more about these characters.
So he goes into the dome and he's back in the classroom, and the aliens do sort of a fucked up experiment on him where he sits down at the clear glass table, but instead of being asked to write the alphabet, an image of what looks like a real ant is just walking around on his desktop, on his tablet in a perfect circle. And they said, kill it. And Jim was like, I'm not going to be forced to kill anything. You're not going to get me to crush this ant. And they were like, kill the ant. And he's like, I'm not doing it. They go back and forth for a while, and then on the screen ahead of him, they project a 3D image of his brother lying in a hospital bed dying from a heart attack.
Jesus.
And the message was, either you kill this ant or we're killing your brother. And out of that choice, Jim reluctantly took his finger and squashed the ant, and he said he saw it like curl up and die on the table. And the aliens say, okay. And he goes, why did you make me do that? And he goes, we just wanted to make sure that you really weren't a killer. We can tell that you really didn't want to do that.
These aliens are wild.
And I don't think that ant was real. I think that was like an augmented reality ant. So I think they get out of it because they didn't actually kill an ant.
Right.
And then they started telling him he needs to start eating vegetarian and stop killing for food.
Hell yeah, Jim.
And he was like, but I love meat. And we can eat meat. And they were like, you guys are an intelligent species. You know how to eat without killing, and you should be doing that. for the betterment of the Earth and for the betterment of your own physiology.
These aliens are kind of like PETA. It's like, right message, terrible delivery.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
They need some new PR.
Yeah.
About halfway through the alphabet training, and remember this has been going on for months now, specifically when Jim said that he was stuck on the letter H. It's been months. He's only on H. The aliens once again gave him a choice. Lust or power. If you'll recall, Jim usually chose lust because he liked watching some 3D porn that he got to think up. Now, why he's watching this in front of the aliens, I don't know. It's all a little weird. So, usually when this option is offered, he chose lust, which would reward his achievements with this alien 3D pornography. And it wasn't that Jim was explicitly getting off on these images, although he was quite aware of his own arousal. It's just that he was more taken with the novelty of this weird reward system.
He's just putting it in the bank for later, that's all.
Yeah. But on this particular visit, Jim decided to see what would happen if this time he chose power. And this led to the first of what I might call Jim's little epiphanies. You see, Jim had begun his lost weekend era. He was spending a lot of time in North Carolina, away from Texas, away from home, not so much working, but just to escape. And not just Teresa, but the alien abduction baggage. He was drinking a lot. He wasn't eating much. He was losing weight. He's just trying to black out and escape his life. But he claims he'd get pulled back on board, back on the craft, and he said that when he'd be drunk at 3 a.m. or hungover, the Greys would basically just zap the drunk out of him, and he'd be instantly sobered up and forced to work on this alphabet. Oh. So when he chose power, he started to get an idea of what these abductions might be all about. A ball appeared, and the supervisors told Jim to make it move.
What do you want me to do? Use telekinesis to move the ball around with my thoughts?
Yes!
As Jim explains in his memoir, The Keepers,
I stared at the ball. I concentrated. To my surprise, the ball slowly began rolling back and forth. When it became what I'd have to call a mental struggle to move the ball, a previously learned symbol would appear, so that when I drew it or duplicated it, I would have more control or power over the ball's movement. Mental control.
Eventually, what happened is that the aliens started adding a square block, which was more difficult to tip over with your mind, and then a little pyramid, these little shapes that Jim was forced to move with his brain. And Jim goes, oh, that's what all this training might be for. He comes to the conclusion that the symbols are not a literal alphabet. They are a key to unlock and program his mind to tap into this alien technology that appeared to be like magic to humans. And he really leans into this idea. This is stuff that we were talking about last week, where he's like, okay, the phasing through the walls, the telekinesis, all the shit that feels like magic, all the stuff that feels like hoodoo, he calls it at one point. This is just alien technology that we have no comprehension how to use. And I think the aliens are trying to teach me how to use this, and it's all powered by the mind, basically.
I like that, and going back to like the thing from last week of the energy, residual like energy thing, that it's sort of like tapping into that when he's in the space, and then there's still some left over, and all of that sort of that residual energy stuff is very interesting, I think.
Yeah. At one point, he has a theory that, and we don't get too much into this, but he has kind of like a throwaway theory that residual energy lasts for a while after an abduction, and he has a hypothesis that the government, like the MIBs, the people who come out, that they have a way of like tracking that energy in people, and that's how they know when people have had contact with UFOs or aliens, because they're basically pinging this energy, like pings them on some sort of like radar or database. I don't know if I believe it, but I like this idea. I do like the idea, as you say, Matt, that like you're basically carrying like this with you for a while after you've been abducted.
Yeah.
Another thing they begin to teach him is that they demonstrate on the screen that they can take huge amounts of alien information or text and compress pages and pages of it into small sigils. And then the sigils would basically be encoded onto a disc that Jim would say was about the size of a nickel. And when you looked at this sigil on this little disc, the entire body of information condensed into those symbols, or that one sigil, would be instantly downloaded into your mind.
Cool. I like that.
I love this.
Why didn't they do that for the alphabet?
Well, that's basically he's
Or he had to
seeing,
learn it first, so he
you
could
got to
see it.
learn this, but all of these things eventually form into these sigils. And this, to me, again, sounds very occulty. This is like sigil magic 101 here. Taking an intention, taking a desire, taking a longer verbal thought, breaking down that thought, stripping it of its literal verbal meaning, and putting it into a symbol that contains all of that power, which then you project in a spell casting to bring that, to manifest that desire into reality. You know, so this gives me kind of like the Enochian angel stuff with like John Dee and Edward Kelly from like the 1600s. This is like some weird. This feels very witchy to me. But I can also see why this would be useful. If you could take a whole book, condense it down into one thing, and be able to absorb all of that information. It's just
Matrix.
Yeah, it's just downloading information. The disk is just literally a hard drive that you just plug into your brain, and then you got it all. You got all that information.
I mean, it's like the basic concept of encryption, you know?
There you go. Yeah. Are you saying that the aliens invented Bitcoin? Is this the first Bitcoin?
You guys, we figured it out. Satoshi.
The aliens are Satoshi. As Jim began to understand these ideas and get a better sense of the work he was doing, things began to slowly change. During one abduction, he found himself awake and naked on a table, surrounded by some worker grays and a supervisor who was watching them in the room. Now, this had never happened before. As much as we hear about these alien abductions where people are found themselves on an operating table, this had not happened to Jim yet. He had always opened his eyes to be in this classroom. Now, he's completely vulnerable on this table and unable to move. One of the things he realized is that he can suddenly understand what the aliens were saying to one another. They were all communicating telepathically, and they weren't doing it in English, but Jim realized that they were going to extract sperm sample from him. This freaked him out. He said that he knew it was going to be pulled out of his body one way or another, and he felt like he was about to get milked.
Okay, Jim.
Jim.
The aliens wheeled out this contraption that looked like some kind of pump. And Jim looks at it and starts thinking at them like, come on, guys, this is not going to work. There's no way I'm going to get hard with all of you in the room. Right?
You can't do it when you're watching.
So they gesture over next to him, and Jim turns and sees this beautiful woman on the table next to his.
She was lying on the table. She was lying on her. I'm sorry, that threw me.
Matt, you get a little hot under your collar?
Yeah, I don't know what we're about to get into.
She was lying on her side, and she wore no clothing. Her back faced me, and she was curved as gracefully as a cello. She was on the table beside me. I could still add 2 and 2, so I knew what she was there for.
1, 2 plus 2 is 4.
She turned over. She was blonde with blue eyes, and she was quite beautiful. It all seemed academic. Though, as I couldn't move any limbs, and certainly not the one they wanted to work, I told them I knew what they wanted, but I couldn't perform. Sorry, no way. Then one of the supervisors came forward with some sort of dark, metallic, or plastic rod. He touched my testicles with it. I felt a tingly electric warmth pass through my groin. Almost instantly, to my astonishment, my penis became erect. 2 workers pushed her on me. I felt no womanly warmth or comfort. Everything was mechanical, as I was forced to mate with her. Within 5 seconds, they got what they wanted.
5 seconds. It's
Yikes.
over. The wand. We have to talk about the wand. This wand shows up. Very good, Matt. I'm so sorry we made you say this.
That was thrilling.
The testicle wand. Now, we've never in Alien Wars seen it or heard of it used for this purpose, to get a boner. But we have so many alien encounter stories where they say the Greys, and sometimes not even Greys, carry with them a thin metallic rod that can freeze people, that can make people vanish, as like in the Voronezh UFO landing in Russia in '89. The Valençol alien encounter, the lavender field in France, they froze him with a wand. They said Frogman has this wand. This idea of a magic wand that is some type of technological instrument that can manipulate time and space, again, pops up over and over again in these alien abduction stories. So here's just another little breadcrumb where you're like, okay, well, we've seen this before, you know?
But not as like a sex toy.
Yeah, not as
That's new.
not as like a Blue Chew pill.
Yeah.
So immediately after this procedure was finished, Jim noticed that the woman now looked like a machine. The aliens had some kind of apparatus there to extract his sample. This was not a woman at all. It was another example of screen imaging, or this holographic masking that the aliens would do to trick the person into seeing something that wasn't really there. So he just fucked a machine that looked like a naked lady.
Happens to the best of us.
During his drunken months, the Greys also revealed to Jim that using holographic projections, that they'd been tracing his entire lineage all the way back to caveman times. And this is where they start to share and open up and become a little bit more forthcoming with Jim. At one point, he's like, all right, you're putting me through all this. You made me have sex with that machine. Why are we doing this? And they sat him down and they showed him. He said that he looked at an image of a guy from, it was in World War II. And he was looking at the Italian fascists and the Nazis in World War II, and they were having a conversation, and the fascists were taking order from the Nazis. And one guy, he was like, wait a minute, this guy looks really familiar to me. And he realized, like, I think that guy, I might be related to him. He might be like a family member from the past. And he felt like all this shame that he might have been a fascist during World War II. And then it jumped back another generation or two, Victorian times. There was like men walking around in top hats. And again, there was another guy that looked like Jim. Now, I picture they all have mullets. It doesn't matter what era they're in. And in fact, in the drawings of the show, they do have mullets. But they would jump back to Victorian times, and then medieval times, and then Roman times. And in all of these images, he would see someone that vaguely resembled him. Now, he didn't think the likeness was really going to be that strong, but it was to illustrate to him, we have been all the way back. He sees like cavemen. He said cavemen on the African savannah.
With sick mullets.
The original
strong
mullet.
belief in fascism.
Yes, a strong belief in fascism that is going to run generations. My favorite is he also saw himself as like a drunken, sad guy in like a tavern, a medieval tavern. But he got the message that we have always been there, we always will be, and we have been around for a long time, and they've specifically been tracing his genetic line. Now, whether this is something that makes him special or this is just what they do, they just keep it in the family, because we've also heard that before, that these abductions are generational. They're passed down from parent to child or parent to grandchild. I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
So Jim starts to develop a theory that the Greys are using people as some kind of DNA storage system. That there is something in the human DNA that was originally alien. And part of the goal here is that the aliens want to live forever. This is him speculating, but he's trying to make sense of what could they want with our DNA. And basically his idea was they use our DNA kind of like stem cells to prolong their existence. So when they need to be repaired or rejuvenated, they come down, they extract what they need out of us, where we're carrying these genetic codes, they put it into their bodies, and it allows them to live longer. Because his idea is that if you're an intelligent race, one of the things you're going to do is you want this is when Jim gets like real. There's another one of like Jim's little epiphanies. This is like when Jim I love it when Jim in this book starts to wax poetic about these. He starts writing like sci-fi fan fiction, because none of these things are like aliens told him this stuff. This is what he's like, maybe they're doing this, maybe they're doing that. But he had this idea that they're basically like storing DNA in us over millennia, and they come back and basically use us as like a genetic bank, and that they can rejuvenate themselves and make themselves live long, because he was like, if you're an intelligent race, the first thing you're going to try to figure out is how to live forever. And I think that this is what part of our connection with the aliens is, that they have encoded some of their DNA into our DNA, our physiological beings, and they come to get it every now and then. What are you thinking, Riley? You're getting real quiet over there.
It's starting to sound a little bit more like schizophrenia.
Well, I'm just saying, we have to think big about these ideas. Okay?
Yeah.
If aliens are really there and they're really taking stuff out of our bodies, then there's going to be a point for it, right?
You would think, though, that if they had that level of mastery over genetics, they don't need like Jim's cum anymore.
Well, except here's the thing, and this is why I think they're really maybe getting Jim's jizz. Is the more accepted, or a popular theory, I should say, that this is all part of a hybridization program.
Right. Okay.
And this was something that Jim was confronted of. He was presented to him after one of his sessions the form of a more human-looking young girl aboard the spacecraft. She was ushered into the room, and he looks at her. He recognizes something in her eyes, and he was like, oh my God, I think this is my daughter. I think that they have made a hybrid with me and an alien, and they've created, I have a daughter now. And as soon as he asked if it was his child, they sent him back down to his bed. This is a thing that we hear all the time with alien abduction stories, that they are that they want us to create this hybridized race. We don't know why. This is a thing that goes all the way back into fairy lore. This idea of the spiritual, I'm going to get a little woo-woo here. But in alchemy, in the occult world, there's this like idea of, we want to merge the materialist world with the spiritualist world, that we want to create something that is both material form and spirit form, right? And that what the aliens are, they represent the spirit form. They're not quite part of this world. They're ethereal. They're elves. They're angels. They're aliens, but they're from another dimension. Right? And one of their interests in us humans is that we are fully material, and they're trying to create a being that can coexist in both dimensions at the same time. Why? I don't know. But this is something, for funsies. But this is something that pops up over and over again in not just alien folklore, but in fairy folklore and the occult world.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that is like a metaphor for the whole idea of like, where do you come from before you're born and where do you go when you die?
Sure. And like remember when everyone was all worked up about 2012 and the Mayan calendar? Do you remember this, Matt?
I still am.
Okay, great.
Just waiting.
Quetzalcoatl.
Any day now.
Quetzalcoatl is the plumaged serpent god that they thought, whether taken literally or not, this god represent. It's a snake with wings, so it literally represents the wings are the spiritual aspect, the snake is the material aspect, and they combine to form this one thing. And so one of the theories about the Mayan calendar was like, we're entering the age where the spirit world and the material world will merge once again, or merge for the first time. Some people think this is pointing to synchronicity. Some people think that this is, that there's going to be some sort of technological thing that like makes us immortal or changes our physiology forever. Some people take it literally that like this concept of heaven on earth, that kingdom come. There's, again, the spiritual realm and the material realm will merge eventually.
Mm-hmm. Or the fusing of the virtual realm and the physical realm.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And things that are not real and things that are real combine, and suddenly nothing's real and nothing is unreal, right? And I feel like we're already experiencing that reality where nothing is true and nothing is false. There's no agreed upon reality right now. We're living through a time where that's happening. This is also the byproduct of me reading about Jim Sparks for a couple weeks now and writing about this story. My brain is breaking.
Yeah, I would imagine. I just don't know. I don't know. So my first bump was like, I don't know what we offer, right, to this like incredibly advanced civilization and race. Like, I don't know. It would be like me going outside and being like, I wonder if I can make a baby with that mud. It's like, it feels like such a step down.
Yeah.
But then I go back to, and what you're kind of talking about now, like that, in one of the early visits when he saw them like fumbling around and not knowing how to interact with the material world, like maybe there is a separation of what they can and cannot interact with. That's why they have to go through these sort of steps to bring him into their dimension or their realm or whatever it is, and a way to meet. So that's the only thing, right? Because otherwise we don't have that much going on.
But these rules get muddy too, because there are other people, including Jim, who will later say there are aliens walking around us looking like humans all the time. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So you kind of get, this all becomes this like gobbledygook at a certain point. And I think this is the stuff that really starts to turn people off of this entire subject. And I'm not sitting here trying to say any of this is true. Again, I love the stories. I love the lore. And I love seeing where the patterns repeat in this lore, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not calling this man a liar. I'm not trying to discount whatever experiences that he's going through. But we always get to this point when it comes to aliens where it just becomes like, I can't take any of this anymore, right? Because you start asking these questions and none of it makes sense. So either these things are so beyond our comprehension that it's just never going to make sense to us, or it's just a bunch of gobbledygook.
Either way, love to get my hand on one of those alien sex wands.
Me too. By late 1989, Jim was ready to graduate alien boot camp. While sitting in the living room one night, Jim started to see the image of the interior of the craft begin to superimpose over his surroundings. This is very Twin Peaks here. This is like when you see the red curtains in the red room overlap with, the woods or the Great Lodge. He looked down and he could see that he was still sitting on his couch, but it was also transparent and his feet were dangling through the carpet as he was simultaneously sitting on a metal table in the other room. Eventually, his living room faded away and he was fully materialized in the dim white room sitting on this table. One of the Greys walked in looking like a human doctor and told him he had graduated. He held up a mortarboard graduation cap and smiled. There were other humans in the room that Jim recognized but didn't understand why. And he had the sense that he was not on the craft, but in some type of underground facility. This wouldn't be the only time aliens would appear as humans or seemingly commingle with real people. Sometimes during his training sessions, when the Greys would want him to cooperate, they would shapeshift into policemen or military generals or some sort of authoritarian figure. During one abduction, Jim seemed to find himself in a large military hangar where the Greys and military men were walking around together. In the distance, through the huge hangar doors, he could see an alien spacecraft out over the desert. On another occasion, he awoke one night to see an alien dressed as Humphrey Bogart standing in his bedroom, complete with a fedora and trench coat, who led him out onto the beach where he ushered him through a glowing square portal. Guys, I told you it was gonna get weird.
Wow. Out of all the alien tables and all the spacecrafts, you had to accelerate into mine, Jim.
One thing that seems to happen upon graduation for Jim was that he was given more freedom to move and wander about the ship or whatever facility is during his abductions. It was like the aliens had begun to trust him, and he had started to earn their respect. Another thing that pops up that jumped out at me in this story, another little connecting dot, another pattern, is at one point he said he's in the classroom and he's looking around and he's wondering what all of this is about, and he says he sees all the aliens freeze, and then he looks over and another holographic image of a bird begins to appear, but this time it's not an owl, it's a phoenix. It's the symbol of the phoenix. Matt, bear with us here, but in another alien abduction story, this woman, Betty Andreasen, said that the aliens showed her a giant phoenix, and that she felt that this symbol had, the symbol of death and rebirth, had like this very important, overwhelming meaning to the aliens, and she felt like when she saw this phoenix, she was looking into the eyes of God. And when Jim sees this phoenix appear on the ship, he doesn't get a sense of God necessarily, but he said, I feel like this represents a higher power for these aliens, and maybe whatever their governmental structure or their governing structure is, the phoenix is a representation of that.
That's cool. I like that.
I love it.
Yeah.
I like, there's just so much X-Men stuff going on.
There is a lot of X-Men here.
And I like actually made sure I didn't bring up the idea that the Men in Black have a cerebro that can locate any identifiable like person with that energy resonating. Like, there's just a lot of X-Men.
There's a lot of X-Men here. You're
Phoenix.
100% correct. You're getting on spaceships. You're meeting bird people. There's the Shi'ar. There's like phoenixes. Yeah, it's great.
We get the Macron crystal in here soon. I'm just gonna
get ready. Juggernaut's on his way.
Great.
Cyttorak is coming down. So it's very safe to say that Jim's life had become genuinely surreal in the late months of 1989. And I don't want to rush through the next couple years because there were some of the most developmental times in Jim's journey. But we need to keep things moving along. So let's hit some highlights, because even though Jim had graduated, his abductions didn't stop. He had also noticed, Matt, you just summoned them, that men in dark suits were beginning to follow him around in his waking life. This began in North Carolina when a black Lincoln Town car started tailing him. Then, when he got home to Texas, it was a white sedan. The sedan would park outside Jim's house, follow him around town, and eventually one of the men got out of the car and approached Jim. The man, who refused to identify himself when prompted, simply told Jim, "We know what you're going through, but you have to stop talking about it. If you don't stop talking about it, we will hurt your wife and family." Despite the fact Jim and Teresa were all but separated at this point, Jim shoved the MIB against the wall and said,
"If you so much as touch my wife and family, I will kill you."
In 1991, Jim decided to pack it up and move back move back in with his parents in Florida. His father had been worried about him and thought that being back in Fort Myers Beach would do him good. and he went with Teresa's blessing. There, he found a UFO abductee support group called the Southwestern Florida Abduction Group, I believe. I need to make a note of that. And there, he started making friends in the UFO community. And this is the first time that he actually started meeting people who knew about this stuff, who knew way more about this stuff than he did. And he started to feel like he connected with people that knew what he was actually experiencing. He began to discover people like Whitley Strieber and met and worked with Bud Hopkins, who Bud Hopkins did regression sessions with him, and he said that they didn't reveal much that Jim didn't already remember, except for one strange memory of being taken into the sky by a strange man as a child. Now, Bud Hopkins is a controversial figure. He's a big name in this lore. He created the term missing time, but a lot of people think that, he's leading his subjects when he's taking them into this hypnotic regression session. So kind of got to take all this stuff, obviously, with a big grain of salt. Although the abductions continued after his graduation, Jim was starting to feel better about his situation. He started sobering up, he started eating healthy, and he focused on getting his life back on track. He also discovered that he had a new role to play in the Alien Grazes game. One night, Jim was pulled out into a rural area in Florida. There, he discovered groups of dozens of other humans, some dressed in their pajamas, some naked, some conscious, some unconscious. At least 3 groups of multiple abductees with worker greys attending to each group. One woman was screaming and crying. Jim received the instructions to comfort her.
I could move. I realized then what was happening. I was being trusted again. I leaned over and placed my hand on the girl's shoulder. You'll be okay. They'll take you aboard their ship and teach you things. A new alphabet, numbers, symbols.
No! You are telling her too much! Just calm her!
These guys are kind of assholes.
Seriously.
One of the other humans pointed at the sky and exclaimed,
Don't spoil our cool surprises! Hey, there's a method to our madness here. You didn't tell her about the porn thing, did you? Don't mention the porn!
One of the other humans pointed at the sky and exclaimed, "Look, they're coming!" Jim looked up to see 3 large UFO crafts, saucers with large underdomes, fly over the 3 groups of people, bathing everyone in a radiating white light with blue hues. He realized he's a part of some mass abduction event taking place. Once aboard the craft, Jim was commanded to lead his group into a room with multiple screens. The abductees sat there as images of luscious green forests and blue oceans withered and dried up. The alien beings were showing them the destruction of Earth. Jim heard the voice say,
"You are destroying your planet."
The purpose of this abduction was loud and clear. And this is when we get to the theme that always comes around. Whitley Strieber, Betty Andreasson, all these people, that our planet is in danger and that we are fucking up our ecology.
Regardless of the source of this, the fact that is so ubiquitous is like, maybe we should pay the fuck attention to that part of this whole thing.
Well, and to Jim's credit, that becomes his message after he's written his book and he starts doing UFO tours. Yes, there's all the crazy alien stuff, but his big message is we have to be better shepherds of the planet. We have to try to avert ecological and climate disaster because we are fucking things up, and it is sending all of us towards destruction.
I just watched a cool thing. Do you guys ever hear the filter theory?
No.
Okay, so one of the ideas, I just watched it, so I might get it a little bit wrong, but the idea that we haven't met any, and we haven't seen any evidence of life or advanced civilizations is because that civilizations will go through a filter. And it's either they survive the filter and get to an elevated stage of what they can achieve, or they don't. And sometimes that comes through like biological means, and sometimes it becomes you gain the ability to destroy yourselves. And so the idea is that potentially we haven't met anybody else or seen any evidence because great civilizations tend to self-destruct before they can
leave their
search
planet.
the stars. Yeah.
I agree with it. I mean,
That totally tracks. Yeah.
I think that tracks, and I also think that gives me hope that the ones that have been able to achieve intergalactic travel means that they've overcome those destructive instincts and that they are more benevolent. They may seem cold and remote to us, but in the way that like scientists seem cold and remote to animals that they study, that they track and study. That, you know, you ask like, why us? Why is this? I think it's just as simple as this is like a track and release program. You know, that if we could go back in time and see ourselves as cavemen, or if we could go to another planet and study alien life form there, we absolutely would, and we would not get involved because we're trying to observe and not interact as much as possible.
Yeah. And we're so close to that threshold that like to study a society right on the edge of that filter that could really go either way is probably a pretty like interesting thing for them to look at.
For them to say,
No, please.
For them to say like, hey, you're going to blow it.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
this is what you're heading
nudge.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you go one way or the other, but like you're going the wrong way right now.
Yeah,
So
they're
you
kind of
get it
being
together.
big brother in a positive sense, not in the Orwellian sense of being like, hey, dude, you guys got to keep this shit on track. And that also explains, you know, there's that big theory of like a lot of this flying saucer activity really started to tick up after the atomic bomb was invented. And that they're very interested in that they're able to dismantle our nuclear weapons, that they definitely do not like the idea of atomic warfare because it's would lead to exactly what we're discussing, which is the failure of an advanced civilization.
Yeah, and the other part of it is being too is like you can't become advanced if you're fighting with yourselves. So they would have a sort of unified approach, which is like, hey, this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
You guys are doing it wrong.
Yep.
It's interesting.
Okay, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. So around this time when Jim's earning the aliens' trust, they bring him a gift. Jim said that he was brought into a room aboard a craft and two aliens walked up holding a box. And he said at first he couldn't figure out how to open this box. He was like tugging at it. It's like what are those little like trick boxes where there's like a little secret lever where you can hide stuff. He was like trying to force the lid off this thing, and then he realized, oh, if I just relax and I calmly slide this thing, it'll open right up for me. These aliens always teaching some kind of lesson. So he opens up this box, and he said inside of the box there were these vials of this black goo. And he's like, what is this? And the aliens say, we pulled that out of your lungs. All of this goo came out of your body. And he got the idea that the gift was that he was basically headed towards some sort of cancer or some sort of illness. And the aliens were like, we cured you. You know, you're welcome. Over the next couple of years, Jim settled into his new life in Florida. Eventually, his abductions began to grow further and further apart. By 1994, his life was getting back to some sense of normalcy. Through his new friends in the UFO community, Jim was beginning to feel a renewed sense of purpose, maybe even a little bit of enlightenment. During this stage of his life, he would sometimes see a shimmering, diamond-shaped craft flying in the sky. Others saw it too. The first time it appeared, Jim was on a beach. A group of strangers pointed at the sky and proclaimed that they were looking at a UFO. Jim told them,
Remember what you're seeing here today. There are people who spend an entire lifetime investigating these things and never see one.
Not long after the diamond craft began appearing to him, Jim had one final acceleration. But this time, he wasn't pulled into a craft. This time, he found himself floating outdoors over what looked like an empty carnival grounds or amusement park. As he descended to the ground, he saw a circle of beings standing below. Jim landed in the middle of the beings. These beings were not worker greys, nor were they supervisors. He felt like he was looking at new aliens that he had never seen before. Perhaps the aliens that had been calling all the shots. They were screen imaging human faces over their alien appearance. Jim could tell that they were a different group from the Greys because he could sense that these creatures were capable of real emotion.
There are some things you need to understand.
The group of alien elders went on to explain that the government was aware of their existence, and at one time they had had a deal, an exchange for alien technology for disclosure. The government knew that humans were not ready for disclosure, so they agreed to help prepare humanity. In the meantime, the aliens would continue to abduct and examine human beings. Another part of the deal was that the government would work towards correcting ecological disasters and dismantling nuclear weapons. But this deal was broken. Human leaders took all the alien tech and never delivered on their promises. It was now up to regular people like Jim and other abductees like him to spread the message that humans were destroying the planet. When Jim asked to see what these elders truly looked like, they told him he would be afraid. He insisted. Eventually, the group of alien elders gave in and the human masks vanished.
Then I saw what they truly looked like. They were big, all right. Their upper bodies looked like football linebackers. As the light became brighter and the details clearer, fear and shock did course through me like lightning. They had scales, and their faces were sort of snake-like or lizard-like. Nothing at all like the smaller aliens. I felt an odd, deep-down, instinctual shock, but I told myself to calm down. Their eyes were small like ours, but diamond-shaped. The pupils were reddish. Their heads were big, and their brows stuck far out from their eyes to various degrees, giving them all some kind of individuality. I was surprised that I was deeply upset by them. Their hands were huge, with thick, club-like features, too thick, by my estimate, to work fine instruments.
With the parting wave, the acceleration happened again, and Jim was returned to his bed, where he slept peacefully for the first time in many years. A few days after that experience, Jim was driving to meet his friend David, another abductee friend that he had met through the UFO community. Suddenly, he spotted 3 diamond craft in the sky, rotating in dazzling triangular formations in the broad daylight. Jim began to vibrate, and a deep voice boomed telepathically in his head.
Goodbye for now.
And with that, the 3 diamonds flew off into the sky. Jim was finally alone. And that is the story of Jim Sparks and the Star People.
Wowee. What a ride.
Matt, Riley, what the hell was that?
I don't know. That's so, there's so much there that's really interesting. And you know what I think the thing that he has going for him, Jim has going for him, as far as like my willingness to believe the story, is that there are such easier ways to get attention.
Yeah.
You know, like this is an awful lot of work. And it seems like a real weird turn for this guy to make late in his life and then just stick to it so hard. So it's like, all right, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think he's
gotcha.
like making this up.
No.
Like, to like pull one over on people. I don't get that sense from this at all.
No.
Yeah.
I will say this. This book is shockingly readable and relatable. Like he writes with a sense of humor. He writes with clear vision. I've read a lot of these books that are kind of impossible to digest. Some of these ideas are wild and they're out there and they're confusing and they don't always add up. And the mythology and the world building is kind of all over the place. But he really manages to personalize this experience. And I got to say, it was a smooth read from beginning to end, and I dare say like a good read. Like he's got a really good narrative voice and he feels very down to earth. And that's the general sense that anyone who comes out of the woodwork or anyone in these books or websites, because I was like, what happened to this guy? What's the sense of him? You know, generally online, people are like, this guy's a quack. He's a fraud. He made all this shit up. But then you have testimonies from other people in the UFO community. And some you got to take with a grain of salt. But like guys like Johnny Mack who say, this guy seems really genuine and down to earth, you know? So I believe that he believed that he was experiencing what he's experiencing.
Yeah, I feel that. And
you know, and
it reached this sort of like X-Files fight the future kind of conspiracy, government, reptilians, the whole deal at the end there. And
he does get eventually, there's stuff that I didn't include in here that's like he's got like notes after the book, and like he gets into like the idea of like time travelers and all this stuff. Like he really starts to expand on these ideas. Some of the ideas like maybe they're using our DNA as like some sort of weird storage. Like all of that comes in the appendices of the books. You know, like when he's like, these are things I don't have answers to, but these are some ideas that I've come up with. Right. And it is funny that the things that he's like, this is just an idea I'm throwing out there. He'll say, this is just an idea I'm throwing out there. I could be wrong. I could be right about this. This is just me like sitting around being like, what if it's this? And then the other stuff, he's like, this is what I was shown and this is what happened to me. So he has the ability as a narrator to go, this is what this is what I'm speculating on, and this is what I experienced, you know?
Mm-hmm. There's kind of a cool thing, right? Like if he's able to recall so much and it's his lineage has been studied for so long since like the dawn of man, that it could almost match up with the way that they taught him the alphabet of going like layering a little bit at a time what you're able to take, and maybe his DNA has been layered with the ability to retain the knowledge that they're trying to pass along.
I like this.
Because otherwise, why would he be able to recall so much so vividly?
Yeah.
If so many people do not have that experience.
Yeah.
Unlocking the latent ability that's been bred into him over generations.
Yeah.
Cool.
Look, this is the thing. When we take the leap into the UFO stuff, it's weird, right? And we always come back to the red flag of like, is this just an episode somebody's going through? Is this a years-long psychotic break that somebody's going through? You know, I don't know, and I cannot make a judgment call on this just reading what I've read about this guy. The red flags for me are there, but also those patterns are there, you know, of like, oh, the wand connects to this stuff. The Phoenix connects to this shit. This is no more or less or weird than the stuff that Woody Derenberger wrote about in the 60s, that Betty Andreasson wrote about in the early 80s. Like it always gets weirder. It always gets less and less credible. It always gets more and more dreamlike. The experience is always, you know, this is why people leave things out when they're telling their stories, because they become these weird dreamlike things, these very Lynchian episodes that the more you talk about it, the more you sound, you know, nuts to the general public, to use a derogatory term, you know, on purpose, because that's what this guy's a crank or whatever. Mm-hmm. I would just say this. And the big red flag for me in what I've read is like, he never talked to a therapist, you know? And I would just say, in general, if you're having an experience where you're speaking to a higher intelligence, or you believe that alien greys are coming to you, ask yourself first, am I having fun with this? Does this feel good? If it doesn't feel good, then just talk to somebody to rule out any other thing, because there are quantifiable tests. There are things that are proven, that are statistically reinforced, that are peer reviewed. There are ways for people to diagnose you with a mood disorder, and you should not be ashamed about that, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say that. And then if the answer is, yes, I am having fun with this, ask yourself, are the people around you having fun with this? If the answer is no to that, go talk to somebody. Let's rule out the idea that it's not some sort of psychosis first, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I feel like if you're really having a spiritual enlightenment, if you're really talking to aliens that are telling you cool shit, yes, obviously, if they're abducting you from your bed, that's very scary. But it should ultimately be like, hey, this is cool, and it should be enlightening to all of those around you. You know, let's just rule out that first. You know, I don't know.
It's the hardest thing to recognize and accept when you're in it, though. That's the whole thing. That's why it's such a paradox. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of the source of this, be it aliens or the human mind, my takeaway, and I said it before, but I think it bears repeating, is that like the message is so consistent and it is so important that we pay attention to the point that we're at and try to get through this filter that Matt was talking about. Like that seems to be the takeaway, like regardless of everything else, you know? Milking tables aside.
Yeah. I sometimes think this could also be like Earth consciousness.
Yeah, something
communicating
like that. Like
with people,
consciousness. Yeah.
Being like, guys, stop it. You're gonna kill me. You're gonna kill. I want you. Like we are a symbiotic relationship here, and you're tipping the scales too far in one direction.
It took me 13 billion years to set this up.
Yes.
Knock it off.
Don't blow it now. You know.
Yeah.
And that these grays and these animal-like aliens are all sort of a projection of the Earth's consciousness, telling us to knock it off. I don't know, guys. Alien gobbledygook, right? It always comes down to this. It always comes down to like, explain the Lynch movie to me. Explain the plot of Mulholland Drive to me. Explain what happened here in Lost Highway. We can't. And that's a frustrating thing. And then I will think circles around this stuff. Then I'll be like, well, there was that one time my dog and I saw an alien gray. So I don't know what the fuck to think about any of this shit. So anytime I start to doubt this stuff, I go, well, Michael, you're wide awake. You're completely sober. And you and your two dogs saw something that looked just like a gray outside of your window. So who are you to judge?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But I also spoke to a therapist about that.
There you go.
Good.
I said, okay, am I losing my mind? And they said, no. And I said, what is it? And they go, I don't know. What do you think it is? And that's kind of what's important. What do you think it is?
Yeah. That's so interesting. And did you ask your therapist to show you their true form?
Fuck.
Reptile linebacker.
Well, there you have it, everybody. Make of it what you will. This is what happens to me every time I go through like a long alien abduction story. I just come out like broken and and mushy, and I'm more confused than ever, and I don't know what to think. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for playing Jim Sparks in this deep dive.
Thank you. I hope to take a little bit of Jim with me moving forward, and just be like, just a real guy.
The one thing
a real deal dude.
The one thing I took from this book, I was like, yeah, maybe I need to be vegetarian. Maybe I should stop.
Hell yeah.
Stop eating meat. Stop killing to survive.
Yep.
Maybe it's time.
There's so much good food you can eat other than meat. I'll say that.
Yeah,
I don't like to be annoying about it, but man, I love it.
This is a plug. I had one of the best sandwiches of my life recently, and it was a vegan Reuben.
Wait,
where?
Awesome. Are you talking about the one at
Maciel's?
Oh no, I haven't had that one.
Dude, Maciel's, my girlfriend turned me on to it.
Okay.
It's a vegan butcher shop, and they have a vegan Reuben that is awesome.
Okay. I like the one at Cantor's Deli, but I'm not.
I haven't had that, but I've heard good things too.
Cantor's.
I'm very excited to try that.
Yeah. Highly recommend.
Cool.
Great. Check
Look at
it
that.
out.
You stick around for the end of the episode, you get a little food tip.
That's right. Matt, this is coming out the second week of April. What should people be on the lookout that involves Matt Cook?
I'll be doing shows around town. If you're in LA, swing by the Groundlings. I will be jumping in and out of shows there. And then if you hit me up on Instagram, that's the best spot to keep an eye out for what I've got going on. And that's at Matt Cook Took Pics.
Love it. I love it. Okay, everybody, don't forget to like and subscribe to BCC on YouTube. Join the other side over on patreon.com/BigfootCollectorsClub for bonus and ad-free episodes of BCC every month, as well as music by the Bray Bard himself. Check it out over there. Then meet us back here next week for an all-new episode of BCC. Until then, good night, Matt Cook. Good night, Club Stouts. And
go get regressed.
I'm gonna go flush this shit out of my brain now. Moving on. Let's do some cryptids. I gotta take a break from this stuff.
Going back to just fuzzy creatures.
I want a fuzzy, furry creature. Can't deal with this creature. Bigfoot Collectors Club is produced and engineered by Riley Bray and executive produced by Riley Bray and Michael McMillan. Our theme song, Come Alone, is by Suneaters, courtesy of Lotuspool Records. Follow Suneaters on Spotify. For 3 bonus episodes every month and ad-free episodes, check out BCC The Other Side at patreon.com/BigfootCollectorsClub.